Hey, tonight we walk the blossom-swept paths of ancient Japan where the petals fall like secrets, and beneath every shrine lies a story sharpened like a blade. The moon rides low over misty rice fields, and the air tastes of wood smoke and legend. It's a place of honor, betrayal, art, war, and the rise of a warrior class whose legacy still haunts the country's soul. The samurai, revealing the little-knownness, is no textbook retelling. You'll hear whispers from the palace corridors, clash swords beneath the cedar trees, and glimpse the fragile line between beauty and bloodshed that defined 1,000 years of Japanese history. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Press the notification bell to update many new videos. Tell us where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. We'd love to know. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're walking through a quiet glade on the edge of a small village, your wooden sandals softly tapping the earth. The sakura trees above your head drop their pink petals like ancient confetti, drifting down in slow spirals as if time itself has grown sleepy. But beneath this tranquil surface, the world is shifting. The year is 1100 CE Japan. Japan is still ruled in name by the emperor in Kyoto, but power leaks from the court like ink from a cracked scroll. Far from the capital, in distant provinces and misty mountains, noble clans raise private armies, settle grudges with blades, and carve their own codes into the flesh of the land. And you're just beginning to feel the tremor. You spot a boy practicing with a wooden sword behind a barn, his swings wild, his grip too tight, but there's fire in his eyes. His family isn't noble. They grow rice and hope. But lately, hope isn't enough. They've pledged loyalty to a local warrior clan, Minamoto, because protection is no longer guaranteed by prayers or imperial edicts. The old ways are weakening. Back in the capital, Kyoto still pretends. The courtiers paint poems onto fans, recite verses under moonlight, and hold lavish ceremonies that smell of incense and irrelevance. The emperor's robes shimmer with golden thread, but he governs less than a village elder. You pass a group of travelers whispering about how even the police have become little more than glorified thugs. Some of them now carry swords, others carry grudges, all carry fear. The central government, known as the Heian court, had once been the polished heart of the realm. For centuries, Fujiwara nobles ruled through subtlety, arranged marriages, and silk-bound bureaucracy. But now, those courtly fingers are too soft to hold a sword. Out here in the provinces, it's different. The land is wilder, the law shakier. And this is where the bushy warrior families are rising. You hear it in the clang of steel in morning drills. You feel it in the growing silence between clans. The samurai don't exist, yet not as a name, not as a code. But the ingredients are in the pot, and the fire's been lit. Your neighbor, old Kenji, tells a strange story one night as the fire crackles in his hearth. Did you know, he says, there was a man who trained monkeys to ride dogs and use spears in battle. A general, they say, Minamoto something. You laugh, you tell him it sounds ridiculous, but he winks. Sometimes truth hides in madness, he murmurs, and war makes madmen of us all. Historians still argue whether such absurd tales-trained animal militias and ninja sorcerers have any basis in fact. But one thing is clear: the more chaotic Japan becomes, the more fertile the soil is for warriors to grow. You pass a shrine. On the road the next morning, its fox guardian statues staring you down with mischievous eyes. Offerings of rice wine and paper charms flap in the breeze. You kneel, clap twice, and bow, not sure if you're praying for protection or courage, maybe both. Later that week, the village hosts a moon viewing festival. Lanterns float in the river like golden ghosts, but even among the music and laughter, there's tension. One of the rice farmers was recently beaten by mounted men demanding tribute. No one knows who they were loyal to. No one dares ask. Everyone knows the imperial guards won't come this far. Everyone knows what's coming. There's talk of the Taira clan expanding their influence, clashing with the You hear names whispered like curses. Kiyomori Yoritomo. Nobody's sure who's right or wrong, but everyone's choosing sides. And still the cherry blossoms fall. So soft, so beautiful, so utterly indifferent. In the distance, thunder rumbles not from clouds, but from hooves. The samurai haven't yet arrived, but the world they'll need to survive, it's already here. You drift toward Kyoto now, the capital in its twilight years. The air is heavy with the scent of plum blossoms and ceremonial incense, but beneath the surface, something's rotting. You walk through the imperial gardens, your sandals crunching, over gravel paths lined with bronze cranes and whispering bamboo. Paper lanterns hang like fading stars above the courtiers' men and women draped in silk. Their faces powdered pale, their lives a theatre of rituals. They compose love poems in the morning and compete in calligraphy by candlelight, never once lifting a sword. This is the height of the Heian period, the golden age of art, literature, and elegant detachment. You pass by a woman reciting passages from the tale of Genji, her voice lilting like a lullaby. A nobleman fans himself while composing a haiku about the sound of distant rain on a lacquered rooftop. You wonder if they've ever actually heard real thunder. But listen closer. Outside the cloistered estates, the walls of the capital crack with decay. The imperial court, bloated with ceremonial posturing, has become a shadow of itself. Laws are written, but not enforced. The emperor sits on a golden throne, but real power has leaked into the countryside like water through a broken bucket. You hear it from the mouths of wandering monks and disgruntled servants how provincial warrior clans, left to their own devices, have begun to take what the court cannot protect. The Fujiwara regents still dress like gods, but they're now spectators in a game played by men with dirt on their hands and blood on their blades. It's not just whispers anymore. You pass a disheveled messenger, his robes torn, his scrolls stained with rain and ash. Bandits raided the south road, he mutters. No guards, no response from Kyoto. They just took everything. You offer him water. He drinks it like he's swallowing down shame, and yet, inside the capital, the parties go on. You're invited to a moon viewing by a minor noblewoman. Her estate is all waxed floors and hollow laughter. As musicians pluck the biwa, she leans in and murmurs, "They say the Minamoto and Taira are recruiting. My cousin left to train last month, left his inkstone behind." She chuckles bitterly. Imagine that, trading poetry for armor. You don't have to imagine it. You've seen it. In the outskirts of the city, training grounds buzz with new life. Archers practice until their fingers bleed. Horsemen ride in perfect formation, their armor mismatched, but their resolve absolute. They don't care for ceremony. They care for survival. And they're no longer just guards or retainers. They are evolving into something else. Something leaner, harder, necessary. Historians still argue whether the term samurai originally meant to serve or to fight. But to you, walking among them, it feels like both. They serve no court, only their clan. They fight. Not for conquest, but because the world demands it. One night, you overhear an argument between two scholars in a tea house. One insists Japan must return to centralized rule under the emperor pure and divine. The other scoffs. You think Kyoto still rules this country, he says, swirling his sake. The real decisions are made by men with horses and steel. They both fall silent. You sip your tea in the corner, wondering if either of them is retort if the truth lies somewhere in the sword's shadow. A week later, the capital holds a grand festival in honor of spring. Dancers wear masks of foxes and gods. Paper streamers ripple in the breeze. But even here, the illusion is fragile. You spot guards at every gate, their armor newer than the court's aging ideals. A young noble bows to you, only to reveal a blade tucked beneath his sleeve. You nod back, pretending not to notice, and as you leave the festival, you pass by a mural being painted on the side of a wall. It shows the emperor, resplendent and serene, holding court over all of Japan. But someone, perhaps a bold peasant, perhaps a bitter samurai, has added a single red stroke across his eyes. You pause. Is it vandalism or prophecy? Back in your room that night, you try to sleep, but the city hums with a tension just beneath the surface. The Heian elite still write about moonlight on water, but their scrolls are starting to smell like smoke, because out there beyond the palaces and poetry, the war drums have started, and they're getting louder. You wake to the sound of wooden clappers echoing through the morning mist temple, guards signaling the hour in the capital. But this time, you're not in Kyoto. You've traveled outward, following the roads that vein through Japan's provinces, where something far more primal stirs beneath the quiet fields and pine-covered hills. Out here, everything feels sharper. The air smells like iron and damp earth. The farmers you pass bow respectfully, but their eyes dart to the horizon, always watching for riders. There are no brocade robes in these parts, no perfume-masked rituals. Here, loyalty is forged in sweat, not ceremony. You've come to visit a rising provincial family, one of many that's begun to trade ink for iron. The lord of this clan is a quiet man named Kenta. His face is weathered, his hands calloused, his presence commanding even in silence. He welcomes you into his wooden hall, lit dimly by oil lamps and warmed by a central hearth where men and women sit cross-legged, sharpening blades and speaking in low tones. This is where you see the early bloodlines of the samurai awakening. The bushi, those warrior farmers and minor nobility have existed for generations. But in times of peace, their duties were modest: protect the harvest, chase off bandits, settle land disputes. Now they're forming the backbone of small armies. Children train with bamboo swords before they can even read. Every clan meeting ends with drills. Every conversation is laced with strategy. You attend one such training session. A boy barely 13 is knocked flat by his sparring partner, a girl just a year older. She helps him up, then immediately knocks him down again. There's no mercy in battle, she mutters. You try not to smile. You fail. Lord Kenta sits beside you, observing. The capital grows soft, he says without looking at you. But my people can't afford softness. If we don't defend our lands, someone else will take them. It's not just about power. It's survival. These rural clans are learning that strength's military, familial, spiritual is the only thing keeping the world from descending into chaos. They swear loyalty to one another, not to Kyoto. Their bonds are written in blood, not brushstrokes. In one corner of the hall, an old woman etches prayers onto strips of cloth. You ask her if she's a priestess. She snorts. I'm a grandmother, she says, and I've buried 3 sons already. These are for the next ones. You step outside as the sun sets over the fields. A group of archers practice in the fading light. Their silhouettes move like dancers, every shot timed to breath and rhythm. A nearby pond reflects it all until a boy's arrow shatters the surface. Later that night, over a dinner of pickled vegetables and fish, you hear tales pass between clans. One speaks of a warrior who survived 5 arrows to the chest before falling. Another about a woman who defended her village alone with only a sickle and a bamboo fence. You ask if they're true. The answer, does it matter? Historians still argue whether these early samurai clans had formal training or simply passed down techniques like family heirlooms. But the evidence is in their eyes, in their posture. These people are preparing for a future that no longer belongs. To emperors and poets, you stay the night in Kenta's guest quarters. A small room with a straw mat and a scroll hanging on the wall. It shows a crane standing still as lightning flashes in the background. You wonder if it's a metaphor for patience or a warning about what happens when it strikes. Before dawn, the household stirs. Another day of drills, scouting, forging, weapons. The rhythm of war is setting in like the ticking of a clock. And as you take your leave, Lord Kenta bows slightly. When the capital falls, he says, remember that it was the countryside that kept the heart of Japan beating. You nod, but you already knew. The storm is gathering, and it's here, in these forgotten fields and half-finished fortresses, that the first true samurai are being born. You ride with a merchant caravan now, the dust of the road clinging to your robes as oxen plod past rice paddies and cedar groves. Your companions trade silk and lacquerware, but what they whisper about most isn't cloth or coinage, the rising feud between 2 powerful clans, the Taira and the Minamoto, at every stop. The stories sharpen like knives. In one village, you hear of a Minamoto raid swift, brutal and bloodless. The garrison surrendered before the first arrow fell. In the next town, it's the Taira who hold the upper hand, recruiting men and taxing traders. The local blacksmith has a backlog of 20 swords and sleeps beside his forge with a spear. Across his lap, it began, people say, with a matter of pride and insult at court. A land dispute, a hostage exchanged and then lost. But like dry reeds in summer, the flames have caught fast and wide. It's not just to families anymore. It's a civil war, and you are now in its shadow. You pause in a tea house tucked beside a small shrine. The air is thick with steam and rumor. An old storyteller, blind in one eye and sharp of tongue, leans in to recount how the Minamoto patriarch was exiled, humiliated by court politics, manipulated by the Taira. His voice lowers as he says, they took his lands, his titles, and his silence, but a Minamoto never forgets. The Taira, led by the cunning Taira no Kiyomori, are bold, strategic, and increasingly arrogant. You witness his men ride through a province, no greetings, no apologies, just banners snapping, like thunder and heels cracking against armored flanks. Kiyomori has risen from provincial obscurity to wield power at court itself, marrying into nobility, placing allies in key positions. He wears diplomacy like armor and sheds it just as easily. One evening, while watching clouds roll over distant hills, you stumble into a group of Minamoto retainers training in secret. Their leader, a lean man with a face carved by wind and war, eyes you warily before letting you stay. They practice silently under moonlight, blades whispering through the dark like falling leaves. He offers you rice and asks where your loyalties lie. You answer with a shrug. To the story you say. He laughs, then follow it close. You'll see it written in fire before long. Indeed, sparks are everywhere. Historians still argue whether the feud between the Taira and Minamoto was purely political or something more ancient, rooted in bloodlines and rival conceptions of honor. Some say the seeds of this war were sown generations earlier, back when imperial command meant little to those who held steel and soldiers. You stop at a castle town held by a Taira-lined lord. The walls are high, the gates gilded, but inside, there's a tension you can taste like sake that's gone slightly sour. The local samurai strut in polished armor, but keep a hand on their blades even during festival dances. A merchant tells you in hushed tones that Minamoto no Yoritomo, exiled and disgraced, is gathering strength in the east. He's still young, but he's clever, patient, dangerous, they say. He studies maps like other men study the stars. The merchant says, he'll rise, he must. The next morning, you see something strange. A roadside shrine has been desecrated, its offerings stolen, its statues defaced. No one will speak of it openly, but a passing monk explains the gods grow angry in times of civil war. Even spirits pick sides. You begin to notice that the roads are less safe. Bandits grow bolder. Checkpoints appear. Each clan claims legitimacy, and both demand loyalty. Farmers hedge their bets, sending sons to both camps. Peasants burn their own fields so no army can claim them. The land itself is growing wary. Still, there are moments of beauty. A misty morning where a crane glides across the lake. A mother teaching her daughter to string a bow behind a paper screen. The glint of moonlight on a lacquered kabuto helmet, resting beside a sleeping warrior. But even in those moments, the ground hums with unrest, like something ancient has awakened and is stretching its limbs. As you ride into the next valley, a black banner flutters on a distant ridge. The merchant beside you grips his reins tightly and mutters, Minamoto. You glance the other way. On another hilltop, red and gold banners, Taira dot, and in the valley between them. Your path continues. The feud has caught fire, and your world is about to burn. You awaken before sunrise, the air sharp with cold and something more anticipation. The earth itself seems to hold its breath as dawn spills over the valley, revealing scattered clusters of armed men. Some in iron-studded armor, others in patched silk in mail. They stand still, silent, watching the ridges like wolves eyeing rival packs. This is no longer the Japan of rituals and robes. You've arrived at the threshold of transformation. These men, once landowners, guards, and proud sons of rural clans, are becoming something else, samurai. They don't yet call themselves that with pride, not formally, but the change is as visible as the steel in their belts. Here, along the blurred borderlands between Taira and Minamoto territories, the warrior class is not just rising, it's being forged in the furnace of civil war. You walk among the camps. In the early light, a man sharpens his katana with methodical precision. Nearby, a younger fighter mends his lacquered chest plate, whispering what sounds like a prayer to his ancestors. There's no music, no boasting, only focus. These are not rabble. They are disciplined, prepared, and driven by something more than glory, honor, duty, revenge, pick a reason. Every man here has one. You meet a grizzled retainer named Daigo, whose clan has pledged allegiance to Minamoto no Yoritomo over a bowl of millet and radish stew. He tells you how the Bushi warrior retainers were once merely tools of noble lords, pawns in political plays. But now, we don't wait for the capital to tell us who to fight. We defend our land, our name. We are what the court used to be only with calluses. He taps his sword, then adds with a crooked smile, and better weapons. Historians still debate when exactly the Bushi transformed into samurais. Some claim it was legal codes in the 10th century. Others say it wasn't until the Genpei War. But walking here now, you know it didn't come from a decree. It came from moments like this. From generations who no longer waited for orders to fight. Who bled not for Kyoto, but for their clans. Banner and their own rising sense of identity. As the sun rises higher, a patrol returns bearing news. Taira forces are nearby. The camp stirs into action like a hornet's nest, yelling, no chaos, just swift, quiet motion. Archers take position. Swords are checked, armor tightened, banners hoisted. The Minamoto mon-white against blue flutters in the breeze like a challenge. You watch as two teenage brothers prepare for battle. One binds his hair into a top knot, while the other scratches a crude prayer into the inside of his scabbard. What if we don't come back? The younger asks. The elder shrugs. Then we meet our ancestors properly dressed. You decide to stay out of the front line, observing from a nearby ridge as the skirmish unfolds. It isn't a full battle, more like a probing clash, but it's vicious. Arrows whistle like hornets. Riders dash through the trees with swords. Drawn, the rhythm is unfamiliar, the brute chaos of peasant revolts, but calculated violence. These men are trained, disciplined, terrifyingly efficient. One Taira soldier is unhorsed, but he leaps to his feet, spinning with a blade that catches the morning sun. He knocks two attackers away before being struck down by a spear through the ribs. You flinch. Everyone flinches. Even the spear-bearer hesitates a moment longer than expected, staring at the fallen man. And just like that it ends. 20 minutes, maybe less. Bodies are counted, wounds bandaged. The Minamoto group returns. To camp, a few lighter than before. You sit with Daigo again that night, staring into the fire. He says nothing for a long time. Finally, he mutters, "Those boys today, they didn't fight like retainers. They fought like wolves." You nod, and wolves survive, you say. He grins grimly. That's what we hope. Later, you're invited into a small ritual beneath the stars. A local priest blesses a group of young warriors before their next raid. He touches each blade with incense smoke, chants prayers to Hachiman, the god of war, and hands out slips of paper scrawled with protective kanji. One boy tucks his into his helmet like a charm. You recognize now that the early samurai weren't just soldiers, they were evolving into something spiritual, bound not only by duty, but by belief. They viewed life and death through a lens sharpened by ritual, ancestry, and personal honor. And while the court in Kyoto still obsessed over lineage and poetry, these men were writing their own legacy in calligraphy drawn in blood. Before you leave the camp, Daigo presses something into your hand. A menuki, a small ornamental grip charm for a sword. It's shaped like a falcon. Keep it, he says. When the fighting spreads and you'll need a reminder of what sharp looks like. You turn the charm over, watching how the firelight glints along its beak. The samurai are rising, and you're walking beside them as they do. The road ahead winds like a serpent through the mountains, and your sandals are coated with the dust of war. You've left behind the skirmishes and hidden camps of the Minamoto, and now find yourself walking toward a different storm entirely, a war that will consume the nation. This is the Genpei War, and it's no longer just the feud of two ambitious clans. It's a reckoning, a national tug-of-war that will tear Japan in half. It begins, slowly, like most storms do. You arrive at a village where the Taira flag flaps confidently from a watchtower. The mood is tense, but not fearful. Local samurai guard the roads. Their armor gleams. Their discipline is tight. There's pride here after all. The Taira hold the favor of the imperial court. Taira no Kiyomori, the clan's ruthless leader, has done the unthinkable, installed his grandson as emperor. You hear this over sake in a roadside inn and nearly choke on your drink. A warrior clan placing a child on the chrysanthemum throne. The old innkeeper says, raising an eyebrow. They don't even pretend anymore. Historians still argue whether Kiyomori's move was strategy or hubris. Some call it visionary consolidating power under the guise of legitimacy. Others say it sealed the Taira's doom by uniting their enemies in outrage. You, however, just call it bold. Very bold. You continue onward, your journey shadowed by rumors of rebellion. In the east, Minamoto no Yoritomo has broken his exile and begun raising forces. His brothers, including the fierce Minamoto no Yoshitsune, are rallying to his banner. The country hums, with movement retainers summoned, fiefs contested, alliances tested over cups of bitter green tea. You visit a neutral temple high in the mountains, one of the last places where both sides still send prayers. Inside, a monk tells you about the omens, earthquakes shaking the coast, crows gathering in unnatural numbers, dreams full of fire. Even the kami, he says softly, have chosen sides. You think back to the battlefield you watched just days ago. That was small, a taste. Now the main course arrives, and it's being served hot. You reach the outskirts of Kyoto, now more fortress than capital. Taira soldiers patrol the streets like wolves in brocade. Behind closed shoji doors, nobles packed bags. The emperor, a boy king named Ontoku, is paraded like a sacred doll, always smiling, always guarded. You catch a glimpse as his procession passes, incense, white horses, bows that never relax. Meanwhile, the Minamoto advance. From the east they come, sweeping through provinces like a brushfire. Towns surrender before the battle begins. Others resist and vanish. You ride for a time with a courier who carries scrolls from one loyalist outpost to another. We used to mark our messages with poetry, he tells you. Now it's just troop counts and food shortages. The war reaches a fever pitch in 1184. You're near the Uji River, where Minamoto forces clash with the Taira in a chaotic rush of hooves, mud, and steel. You find yourself crouched behind a ruined gatehouse, watching as Minamoto Yoshitsune performs a feat that will be told in song for centuries. Leading his horse across the river's narrow logs, under a hail of arrows, a young boy beside you gasps. He's not a man, he whispers. He's a thunder god, and honestly, you're starting to believe it. The Minamoto gain ground quickly, cutting a scar across the country. Their discipline and leadership shine, but so does their ruthlessness. Villages suspected of harboring Taira soldiers are burned. Defectors are executed publicly. Mercy becomes a luxury, and the samurai, both Taira and Minamoto become tools of unstoppable momentum. Still, the Taira are not cowards. You hear of sea battles along the inland sea, where Taira naval archers rain death from atop swaying decks. They know the tides, the winds, the hidden coves. Even as they retreat, they do so with poise, pulling the boy emperor with them like a sacred talisman. You stop in a coastal town where a shrine maiden sings a dirge for the fallen. Her voice carries over the harbor, mingling with the cries of gulls. A fisherman beside you shakes his head. Every time they fight, the ocean turns red. The fish won't come back for weeks. He's not joking, you wonder. Where does it end? You're told the Taira have fallen back to Yashima, a fortress by the sea. There, you witness one of the war's more surreal moments. A Taira fan target, mounted on a mast offshore, fluttering in the wind. The Taira challenge the Minamoto to shoot it down. Yoshitsune accepts. One of his archers steps forward, bows gracefully, and with a single arrow slices the fan from its pole. Even in civil war, style matters. You marvel at how art and violence coexist here. How the samurai can compose poetry about the moon while cleaving. Skulls beneath it, night falls as you camp with traveling monks who offer prayers for the dying on both sides. One tells you an old saying, in times of war, even the gods wear armor. You don't know whether to laugh or shiver. The Genpei War isn't just a conflict between clans. It's the birth cry of a new Japan, and you're here, midwifing the moment. The ground beneath your feet isn't just battlefield soil. It's the foundation of a future ruled by warriors. The sea is restless. You stand on a rocky cliff overlooking the Strait of Shimonoseki, wind whipping your robes like the banners of war. Below, ships gather like shadows, their sails snapping in the storm-stained air. You've arrived at Daimyos, the site of a coming reckoning, one that will seal the fate of an empire and plunge a child emperor into legend. It's April 1185. The Taira are desperate. The Minamoto are relentless. You've followed this war from its whispered beginnings to this thunderous crescendo. And now you stand on the edge of the most pivotal naval battle in Japan's early history. The fleets of vast hundreds of ships on each side, lining the channel like leaves floating toward a drain. The Taira, masters of the sea, command sleek, fast vessels crewed by experienced archers and sailors. Their banners bear the red sun, their spirit unbroken despite retreat after retreat. At the heart of their fleet is a single ship, gilded and protected. Aboard it stands the child emperor Ontoku, barely 6 years old, dressed in imperial robes, a sacred mirror at his side, the imperial regalia of Japan guarded like holy relics. He doesn't know yet that he's sailing toward legend. You board a Minamoto supply vessel for the battle, eyes wide as final preparations begin. Samurai bind their armor with silent determination, brush their hair back, and utter quick, breathless prayers. Nearby, you overhear a general briefing his captains. Wait for the tides to turn. We don't just fight men, we fight the sea. That's no metaphor. Historians still argue whether the tides at Daimyos were understood with precision, or if Minamoto no Yoshitsune simply gambled well. Either way, the battle's outcome will owe as much to water as it does to steel. The horn sounds. The battle begins. You brace as arrows launch into the air with a sound like splitting bamboo. The fleet surge forward. Ships ram, splinter, and pull away. Archers fire in relentless volleys. Samurai leap from one deck to another, slashing, screaming, bleeding. The air reeks of salt, sweat, and smoke. You duck behind a crate as a Taira. Arrow skims past your head. Across the water, you spot something surreal, a mother carrying her child, both clad in court robes, climbing to the edge of a ship. She clutches the imperial regalia to her chest. You know what she's about to do. The Taira are losing. The tide literally and figuratively has turned. Minamoto tactics, aided by a sudden shift in the currents, force the Taira ships to cluster. In confusion, one commander defects mid-battle, revealing Taira positions. Yoshitsune, ever brilliant, strikes with surgical cruelty. Panic spreads among the Taira. You watch men fall into the sea by the dozen, some leaping, some pushed, some pulled under by fire and sinking decks. Then you see her again, Emperor and grandmother, holding the child Emperor tight, whispers to him through tears. Her mouth forms words you cannot hear, but you don't need to. She leaps, vanishing into the cold waves. The sacred treasures go with them, some lost forever, others later recovered by divers who swear the ocean wept that day. You stand frozen, speechless. Around you, victorious Minamoto warriors begin to cheer, but not with joy. Their voices are weary, hollow. The war is over, but the cost is written in the tide. The Taira are no more. You return to shore, your feet sinking into wet sand, your clothes soaked in sea spray. Fishermen mutter prayers for the dead. A girl lights a lantern and lets it drift across the water, one of many. The bay glows with floating light, tiny stars for the fallen. In the days that follow, word spreads like wildfire. Minamoto, New York, is undisputed. He does not march into Kyoto like a conqueror, but sends a message. The age of the samurai has begun. He will not take the emperor's throne. No, he does something more audacious. He creates a new power alongside the imperial court. A military government. The Bakufu headquartered not in Kyoto but in Kamakura. From this new seat of strength, Yoritomo rules as shogun, the supreme commander. You've watched samurai rise in the provinces. Now they rise as the architects of Japan's destiny. Still damp from battle, you sit at a dock and stare at the empty sea. A fisherman offers you grilled eel on rice. You eat slowly, in silence. The water laps at the pier like it's trying to forget. A monk joins you. The boy emperor is a god now, he says. Wasn't he already, you asked. The monk shakes his head. Now the world believes it. Historians still debate the meaning of Danura. Was it the end of noble arrogance, the triumph of martial order, or just another chapter in Japan's long tale of balance between sword and scroll? You watch the tide roll out. Whatever it was, it washed the world clean and carved a new one in its place. The tide has receded, but power like the ocean never rests for long. You now travel east, away from the scorched political heart of Kyoto, through pine-blanketed valleys and quiet fishing towns, toward a place whispered of by soldiers and monks alike, Kamakura. It isn't a capital in the traditional sense. There are no golden palaces or temples gilded in glory. But it is something more important now. It is the seat of Minamoto no Yoritomo, and the heartbeat of a new age. Here, in this wind-swept coastal town flanked by hills and open sea, Japan's first shogunate is born. You arrive under the arch of a newly erected torii gate, the smell of cedar and sea spray sharp in your nose. The town bustles, but with discipline. Officials carry scrolls of land records. Messengers dart through the muddy streets like ants with urgent missions. Armorers hammer steel in steady rhythm. This isn't the idle grandeur of Kyoto, it the military machine of Kamakura, efficient and alert. And at the center sits Yoritomo himself, tone-faced, cold-eyed, and always calculating. You watch him from afar, presiding over petitions, assigning stewards to distant provinces, issuing decrees with curt nods. He wears no crown. He doesn't need one. His authority is built not on divine right, but on the backs of soldiers and the blade of victory. This is the genius of the Kamakura Bakufu. Yoritomo has done something radical, created a government within a government. The emperor still reigns in Kyoto, cloaked in ritual and incense, but it is Yoritomo who rules. His samurai vassals Gokunin, they're called, swear loyalty not to the throne, but to the shogun, its power through structure, not symbolism. Historians still argue whether Yoritomo's rule was a betrayal of imperial tradition or its salvation. You sip bitter green tea with a scholar who insists, without Kamakura, Japan would have split like rotted wood. Another scholar scoffs. He was no more than a glorified warlord with a bureaucrat's sense of drama. You smile, maybe. He was both. What matters is that it works. For now, you attend a council meeting beneath a humble roof of wooden beams. It's not courtly poetry and perfumed robes anymore. The men gathered here wear armor, some still smeared with old blood. They argue about land, taxes, rice yields, and loyalty oaths, not love verses or cherry blossoms, and yet there's beauty. In the clarity, you meet a woman named Mo, a veteran of the Genpei War. She no longer rides to battle but oversees a small garrison just outside Kamakura. Over grilled fish and warm sake, she tells you that the samurai now have something they never truly did before: institutional legitimacy. Before, we fought for lords. Now, we fight for law, she says, tapping a scroll with the shogun's seal. Or at least the kind of law that comes with a sharp edge. You ask if she ever misses the old ways, the duels, the chaos. Tomo pauses, then answers, chaos is never gone, it just learns to bow. You stroll through the town's growing temple district, where Buddhist monks and Shinto priests coexist in wary harmony. Yoritomo, ever the strategist, supports religion carefully. He encourages Zen Buddhism, which appeals to the samurai's quiet meditation, its emphasis on discipline, its tolerance of sudden death. You see samurai praying with their swords resting across their laps. One scrawls a poem in the dirt before blowing it away with a breath. A warrior's thoughts should leave no footprints. He mutters. This blending of sword and spirit becomes a defining trait of the samurai under the new shogunate. And Kamakura becomes the spiritual forge where both are sharpened. Still, not everything is stable. There are rumblings, land disputes between vassals, whispers of betrayal. Yoritomo's rule is efficient but brittle. He trusts few, forgives fewer. You hear that he's growing paranoid, especially of his brother the brilliant general who won the war but captured too much love from the people. You recall the crowd cheering Yoshitsune's river crossing at Yuji, the archery miracle at Yashima. You remember thinking, this man is unstoppable. Apparently, Yoritomo thought the Samand didn't like it one bit. Eventually, word spreads. Yoshitsune is outlawed, branded a traitor by his own brother. He flees, chased across the country like a ghost with a price on his head. You ask a monk why Yoritomo would banish the hero of the war. The monk shrugs and quotes an old proverb. The tallest tree is first to be cut by the wind. You can't help but feel a chill. The samurai have risen, but even among them, there is no safety from the shogun's gaze. One night, You climb a hill overlooking Kamakura, lanterns flickering like stars below. The wind carries the scent of the sea and something more subtle. Order, cold, calculated order. Yoritomo has given the samurai power and purpose. He's ended an age of chaos and begun one of regulation. But at what cost? You turn your eyes to the east, wondering if Yoshitsune still rides beneath that moon, wondering if a sword built on loyalty can survive a heart full of fear. The shogunate stands strong, but the cracks have already begun to form. You wake to the sound of metal on stone steel tapping against rock, again and again. A rhythm, a ritual. You follow the sound to a small compound on the edge of Kamakura, nestled beside a bamboo grove where sunlight filters through like golden mist. There you see two young samurai locked in combat, their wooden swords clashing in perfect time, feet gliding across the packed dirt like dancers on a stage. But this is no performance. This is discipline. This is where the samurai code begins. To take shape, not in scrolls or decrees, but in daily repetition, in bruises, in restraint. You're witnessing the quiet birth of bushidō, the way of the warrior. It doesn't have a name yet. Not really. The samurai haven't gathered their values into neat lines of calligraphy. But you see it an ethic emerging, forged in the tension between violence and virtue. A senior instructor, a man with a back straighter than a measuring stick and eyes like frozen iron, oversees the students. When one falters, he doesn't shout. He simply says, again. When one wins too eagerly, he mutters, no glory in gloating. Over tea, he tells you that a warrior's strength lies not just in his blade, but in his character. We do not kill for sport. We do not fight for vanity. We do not serve for coin. He pauses, or at least, that is what we try to believe. You ask where this philosophy comes from. He smiles faintly and replies, from need. When men have swords and no guidance, they become beasts. So we give them rules, even if we break them. Historians still argue whether bushidō was formalized in the Kamakura period or romanticized centuries later. But in this moment, you feel its seed planted in the daily life of these warriors. Respect for authority, loyalty to one's lord, calm in the face of death, these are not yet commandments. They are habits, and habits become culture. You accompany the instructor on a patrol through the countryside. On the way, you stop at a farm where a samurai tenant oversees rice production for his lord. He greets you with a bow, then scolds a laborer for shorting the grain count. The tone is harsh, but not cruel. My lord feeds 500 mouths, he explains. A single dishonest measure is a blade at his throat. You realize bushidō isn't just about battlefield valor. It governs conduct, economy, even the private moments when no one is watching. It's a full life code, and it's still forming like molten iron poured into a slow, invisible mold. That night, you return to a small dojo in Kamakura where students light incense before a shrine to their ancestors. Each offers a bow. Some murmur prayers. One, a boy no older than 12, places a single lotus blossom before the statue of a man you presume was his father. You think about how, in other cultures, warriors are measured by conquest. Here, increasingly, they are measured by conduct of course, not everyone lives up to the code. You hear of lords who exploit their retainers, samurai who drink too much and die in alleyway duels, men who betray their oaths for land or lust. The code, like all ideals, is more aspiration than reality. Still, you can't deny it's catching on. You meet a wandering swordsman on the road to Hakane. His kimono faded, but his eyes sharp as obsidian. He carries no banner, no employer, just a long blade and a small pouch of rice. He introduces himself simply as Ren. I follow the path, he says. Not because I must, but because it gives me shape. You ask what he means. He says, a sword without a sheath is dangerous. A samurai without a code is worse. You share food by the roadside. Ren tells you of a duel he once walked away from. The man insulted my lord, yes, but he had a sick wife, children. What is honor if it leaves widows behind? He shrugs. Sometimes the path is in not drawing the sword. That sticks with you. Not every samurai is defined by violence. In fact, the best of them choose peace when possible, and only draw steel when the soul is steady. Before parting ways, Ren offers you a haiku scratched into a sliver of bark. The plum tree blossoms even after winter's rage softness wears. The stone, you pocket it carefully. Bushidō will one day be codified, printed, taught to generations as a noble creed. But here, in its infancy, it's something quieter, earned rather than declared, practiced rather than preached. As you walk away from Kamakura, you realize the samurai are no longer just warriors. They are becoming symbols of control, of virtue, of the tightrope between death and dignity, and in their shadows, a new Japan walks beside them. You wake before the sun, breath misting in the cold air, the world around you shrouded in frost. Somewhere above, pine needles tremble under the weight of snow. Around you, the training ground stirs. This isn't Kamakura anymore. You've traveled north, into the rugged mountain provinces where warhorses trample ice and swords sing against the chill. Here, the samurai train in silence and steel, far from the political centers, where the wind is the only audience and the trees hold your secrets. It's winter, and everything is harder. You stand beside a wooden platform as two samurai spar, barefoot in the snow. Their yells sharp, their movements fluid despite the cold. They aren't just learning how to fight, they're learning how to endure. The sword, for them, is not simply a tool of war. It's an extension of will. Later, over a steaming bowl of miso, you sit beside an older warrior named Sadnobu. His face is half hidden by a scarf, but his eyes are alive with that unmistakable focus you've come to associate with the best of them. We train in the snow, he says, because snow doesn't care how noble you are. Fair point, he invites you to observe a multi-day bushuku, an intensive training retreat where samurai from nearby provinces gather to hone their skills and forge bonds. You watch as they rise before dawn, chant sutras while kneeling on freezing stones, and practice sword forms until their breath is ragged and hands blistered. One moment catches you. A young samurai slips during a kata and slices his own palm. He winces, but doesn't stop. Blood drips onto the snow, turning it pink. No one says a word. Historians still argue whether samurai of this period trained more in battlefield strategy or personal swordsmanship. There's evidence of both treatises on war formations, but also meticulous attention to kenjutsu, kaido archery, and yabasami mounted archery. Here in the mountains, you see all three taught like sacred rites. One morning, you join a Zen meditation session beside a half-frozen stream. The instructor, an old monk with eyebrows like snow-dusted, more speaks, just once. A mind that moves dies. A sword that hesitates kills. You sit for an hour in stillness, fighting the urge to shiver or shift. You fail, but beside you, the young warriors do not move at all. You begin to understand the strange, marriage of opposites that defines the samurai. Fury and calm, discipline and spontaneity, motion and stillness. It's not a contradiction, it's a balance. During a snowstorm one evening, you huddled by a fire with several warriors. They trade stories not of conquests, but of failures, near-deaths, betrayals, even small humiliations. One man confesses he once lost a duel to a monk with a stick. Another says he cried the first time he had to kill. No one mocks. They nod. Samurai are taught to embrace impermanence, to face death not as a curse, but as a constant companion. You hear one warrior recite lines from the Hyuki, a text written decades earlier. The flow of the river is ceaseless, and yet the water is never the same. They aren't just preparing for war, they're preparing for ephemeral existence, for becoming part of the story and then fading like mist. Later that night, as the fire dims, you're invited to hold a katana crafted by a famous blacksmith whose forge sits a valley away. It's beautiful, perfectly balanced, its blade folded dozens of times, its hammer temper line a ghostly wave. They say the sword took months to create, and that the blacksmith placed it under the full moon before sharpening it. You lift it and feel its weight, not just the physical heft, but its presence, like it remembers every hand that's ever held it, every cut it's ever made. A boy asks the instructor, "Sensei, do swords have souls?" The man pauses. "If you treat them like they don't, they'll find a way to get one." He's joking, maybe. Before you leave the mountain dojo, Sedanobu gifts you a small tonto, a short dagger used in both combat and ritual. Not for battle, he says, for understanding. Keep it sharp, like your memory. You accept it, wondering if he means it literally or as a metaphor. Around here, it's usually both. As you descend the trail back toward the warmer lowlands, your footprints fill with snow behind you. And somewhere above, on the ridge, you hear the soft clack of wooden swords meeting in the cold morning light. This, you realize, is where the samurai become more than soldiers. This is where they become philosophers with blades. The ground shifts beneath your feet, not metaphorically this time, but in a violent lurch that sends lanterns crashing and birds erupting from treetops. You stumble to the side of the road, hands bracing against a swaying gate as the earthquake roars through the land like a beast from the underworld. This is 1293, and Kamakura has just been shaken to its bones. You emerge from the roadside grove to see the aftermath unfolding like a scroll dropped in water. Collapsed homes, cracked roads, frightened children clutching wooden beams. Samurai stand dazed in courtyards, holding blades, not against invaders, but against the trembling of the earth itself. You help a group of monks restack fallen stones at a small Jizo shrine. One of them, still clutching his prayer beads, says, "Even the gods blink sometimes." The Kamakura earthquake was real, its devastation recorded in temple logs and diaries. Historians still debate its scale. Some say it was moderate, others believe it was catastrophic. But the truth, like the tremor, lives in the details. You see it in the cracked well that no longer holds water, the elderly man sifting through broken rice barrels, the shattered statue of Cannon, face lost to rubble, and worse than the buildings is the instability it reveals, not just in soil, but in society. The Kamakura shogunate, though once strong under Yoritomo, now wobbles like the lanterns in the aftershock. His descendants lack his discipline. Factionalism festers. The HJ clan, originally regents to the shogun, have become power-hungry puppeteers. They pull strings behind the curtain, while the puppet emperor and puppet shogun dance in a house. of cracked foundations. You sit in on a court hearing days after the quake. Instead of disaster response or rebuilding plans, the lords argue about land rights. Who owns what? Who owes whom? Who profits from whose misery? One samurai slams his fist against the tatami. Another draws a blade before being restrained. A peasant woman kneeling in the shadows whispers to you. They fight over stones while our children dig for food. You nod grimly. She's not wrong. Later, you visit a Kamakura temple where survivors shelter among the incense and tatami. A Zen monk delivers a sermon beside a cracked Buddha statue. Buildings fall, he says. So do governments. So do bodies. The question is, what stands up afterward? And while many rebuild quietly, others see opportunity in the wreckage. Rebellions flare in the provinces. Minor lords question the HJ's authority. A few charismatic warriors begin gathering followers, not with banners, but with promises. A new order, a just one. One not ruled by cowards hiding behind the throne. One of them, a middle-ranking retainer named Masamune, speaks to a crowd from the back of a cart. You watch, half hidden behind a pine trunk. His words are simple but powerful. The shogunate no longer protects, it taxes, it hides. It waits for monks to stop the next quake with prayer. I say we need new hands on the sword. The crowd murmurs approval. Historians still argue whether the earthquake accelerated the decline of the Kamakura shogunate. But in your sandals, feeling the broken roads and broken trust, the connection seems painfully clear. You walk with a carpenter rebuilding a torii gate in a mountain village. He works silently, sweat mixing with sawdust. When you ask if he still believes in the gods, he shrugs. I don't know if they're real, he says, but the gate is bare. People feel better when it stands. That night, you dine with a retired samurai named Norikazu. His left hand shakes slightly, from age or injury, you're not sure. Over. Roasted chestnuts and warm sake. He tells you he's seen both sides of Japan, the glory of Yoritomo's reign and the rot of its inheritance. The samurai rose because the court grew soft, he says. But we are becoming soft now, too. We count coins. We hold titles we haven't earned. We eat well while others starve. And now the earth warns us, fix this or be buried with it. You sit silently, watching the firelight flicker across the wall. It's not just an earthquake. It's a metaphor, a warning, and like the cracked walls of Kamakura, the samurai's moral foundation is showing its fractures. As dawn breaks, you pack your things and prepare to leave the city. But before you do, you stop at the still damaged shrine, now draped in new paper charms and red ribbons. The people pray not for wealth nor power. They pray for balance. Because when the earth shakes, even the strong fall, and only those who learn to bend without breaking will survive what comes next. You stand on a windswept cliffside, gazing out at the churning sea. The sky is thick with storm clouds, and somewhere in the distance, sails appear, hundreds of them, dark shapes, like sea serpents with spines of canvas. They come not with trade or tribute, but with intention. It is 1274, and the Mongols have arrived, led by Kublai Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan and founder of the Yuan dynasty. The Mongols have sent emissaries to Japan before offering friendship, though the terms felt more like demands. The Kamakura shogunate politely ignored them, or, depending on which side of the scroll you read, arrogantly refused. And now, the consequences are floating right toward you. You travel south to Hakata Bay, where rumors of an invasion have turned. Fishermen into scouts and merchants into fort builders. The samurai gather in force. You witness them assembling along the shoreline, proud and poised, perhaps too confident. You speak with one veteran named Hidemoto. He tightens his bowstring and mutters, "They fight from horseback. What good are horses in water?" You hope he's right. The Mongol forces land, and the chaos begins. Unlike anything the samurai have seen before, the Mongols fight in formation with disciplined coordination. They use explosives, flinging thundercrackers, primitive bombs that explode with terrifying sound and shrapnel. Their archers fire in waves, not duels. Their shields are thick, their advance relentless. The samurai, by contrast, are used to ritualized combat, single duels, declarations of names and lineage, glorious one-on-one contests. The Mongols do not care for such traditions. They cut through samurai lines like a sickle through grass. You watch Hidemoto charge alone, shouting his name proudly, only to be cut down by a volley of arrows before he reaches the enemy. No one even looked up. The defenders regroup by nightfall. The Mongols retreat to their ships, either to resupply or because of mounting resistance. You hear both theories whispered. And then, as if the gods themselves have had enough of this foreign intrusion, the storm comes. A massive typhoon rips across the bay, slamming ships into one another, dragging them out to sea, dashing them on the rocks like toys in a tantrum. The survivors flee. The ocean, it seems, has done what swords could not. The Japanese call it kamikaze, the divine wind. Historians still debate the storm's role. Some say it saved Japan. Others argue that Mongol supply chains and naval inexperience doomed the invasion anyway. But you stood on that coast. You saw the sky churn like boiling ink and heard the wind scream with the voices of 1,000 ancestors. And you saw what came next. Preparation, because Kublai Khan, he doesn't quit. You spend the next few years traveling along the coast, watching the samurai do something unprecedented. Fortify. Villages once protected by wooden gates now build stone walls. Horses are trained for formations. Archers drill in rows. The shogunate, rattled by the near disaster, now takes the Mongol threat very seriously. You meet a general named Shigetada, tasked with leading the next defense. He doesn't smile much. "We won't wait on the gods this time," he says. "If the Mongols come again, they'll find we've learned." You also observe something else, a cultural shift. The samurai, once obsessed with individual honor, begin to value unity. There's talk of coordinated tactics, of sacrificing glory for victory, of evolving, and it's just in time. In 1281, the Mongols return, this time with over 4,000 ships and more than 100,000 troops, a staggering force, larger than any Japan has faced. But Japan is no longer unprepared. The coastal fortifications hold. Samurai attack landing parties before they reach shore. Night raids sabotage supplies. A stalemate ensues. And then, as if on cue, another typhoon again. The Mongol fleet is shattered again. Japan survives. Historians still argue if 2 typhoons in 7 years were luck, climate, or divine intervention. You, standing on the beach watching the waves reclaim splinters of ships and fragments of armor, wonder if it was something else entirely. Resolve made manifest. The Mongols never return. But not everything is celebratory. The victory brings no spoils. The warriors who defended Japan expect reward land, gold, titles. But the shogunate, stretched thin, has little to give. Tensions rise. Discontent festers. Some samurai begin questioning the very structure that governs them. You share tea with a veteran named Kenjiro. He rubs a finger along the edge of his blade and says, "I fought to protect this land, and now I can't even feed my children." You understand now that even victory carries a price, and the kamikaze, though it saved the country, also cracked the loyalty between samurai and shogunate. Trust is like a bowstring once stretched too far. It doesn't snap all at once. It whispers, frays, then breaks. Still, for a time, Japan breathes easier. The sea is calm again. You walk the coast one last time, watching villagers rebuild shrines in thanks. They burn incense. They carve wooden tablets. They write prayers of gratitude to the wind, and above them, perched on a cliff, a young boy practices with a wooden sword. His stance is perfect. His face is calm. He is ready, because the world has changed, and so have the samurai. You return inland beneath the soft blush of early plum blossoms, the roads once again busy with caravans, pilgrims, and the ever-watchful samurai. But beneath the tranquility, a shift hums like tension in a bowstring. The Mongols are gone, and the divine wind has passed, but something else brews quietly within the walls of Kamakura and beyond ambition cloaked in formality, wrapped in cunning. You've entered the era of Ashikaga, and nothing about this man is simple. He begins as a general loyal, or so it seems, to the Kamakura shogunate. The court in Kyoto, weakened and sidelined for generations, finally makes a move. The emperor, Go-Daigo, longing to restore imperial rule, calls for help to overthrow the military government. Takoji answers the call. For a moment, you believe you are witnessing the unthinkable, the emperor reclaiming power. You travel to Kyoto, now crawling with excitement. In the streets, people sing old court poems and hang painted scrolls. The temples echo with renewed purpose. Even the smell of incense seems richer. But something is wrong. Ashikaga Takauji has helped restore the throne. Yes, but not out of reverence. You hear whispers in the alleyways, from monks and merchants alike. The general has no intention of stepping aside, and he doves within months. Takauji turns on the emperor, claims he rules unjustly, declares himself the rightful protector of Japan. He installs a new sovereign and establishes his own line of control. You realize what you're witnessing is not just treachery, but a strategic pivot, the shogunate reborn under a new name, the Ashikaga shogunate, centered in a district of Kyoto. Historians still debate whether Takoji's betrayal was ideological, opportunistic, or simply inevitable. You sip tea with an aging scholar who says, sometimes the sword that opens the door is also the one that slams it shut. The people are confused. Two emperors now claim legitimacy. Kyoto is divided. Loyalties fracture like splintered jade. You see samurai wearing mismatched crests, unsure who to serve. For a time, there are two courts. The northern court, backed by Ashikaga, and the southern court, loyal to Go-Daigo. Japan itself is split in two. It's not civil war anymore. It's civil confusion. You meet a samurai named Keisuke, who's changed allegiances twice in 1 year. He shrugs. I serve whoever can feed my men. Loyalties, noble but hungry. You don't know whether to pity him or admire his honesty. Amid this chaos, a strange thing happens. Even as war creeps back into the corners of the country, culture blossoms. The Ashikaga court, centered in Kyoto, becomes a patron of the arts. You walk through newly built Zen temples, where gardens are raked with the same precision as a master swordsman's kata. No theater emerges, stylized, haunting. You watch a performance lit only by firelight, where a masked spirit laments betrayal and impermanence. The crowd is silent. No applause, just thought. You spend time in the company of tea masters, those peculiar artisans who host chanawu, the ritual tea ceremony. It's simple, a bowl, a room, a moment. But they speak of it like warriors speak of duels. Every movement is intentional, one tells you, like drawing a blade. Even ink painting, once confined to monks and scholars, becomes a samurai pursuit. Black lines curve across white paper landscapes, cranes, dragons. You're surprised by how many warriors now keep brushes beside their blades. It's here that you notice a curious contradiction. As the political landscape grows more unstable, the samurai grow more refined. Their code, once a loose thread of values, now interlaces with art, discipline, and spiritual reflection. You attend a lecture in a mountain temple where a Zen monk says, "The sword polishes the mind, the brush steadies the hand. The tea bowl humbles the soul." He might be onto something, but don't mistake refinement for peace. You hear of assassinations in Kyoto alleys, of villagers razed for supporting the wrong court, of generals poisoned by their own retainers. The Ashikaga rule, but barely. They are kings of fog, visible, powerful, but intangible. Unstable, you travel with a young scribe named Kaoru, tasked with documenting the names of all the Ronin masterless samurai merging from the chaos. His scroll is long. He laughs bitterly. At this point, it's easier to count the samurai who still have lords. The balance is shifting again. And though the Ashikaga rule in name, the cracks in their foundation are deeper than they know. One evening, as you walk the silent corridors of a half-abandoned palace, Kaoru says softly, "We built this court like a no-mast, beautiful on the outside, hollow behind." You stop, listen to the wind slip between the pillars, and somewhere far off, you hear the unmistakable sound of swords being drawn. Again. You descend into a valley just as the first cherry blossoms begin to open small, defiant bursts of pink against a sky thick with smoke. The scent of ash mingles with spring, and on the wind you hear it again. The realm is broken. Japan, now, well into the Muromachi period, has splintered like cracked porcelain. The Ashikaga shogunate reigns in name, but its grip slips daily. You ride through province after province where daimyo regional warlords rule like kings. Their banners are bold, their taxes high, their tempers short. There is no longer a single Japan. There are 100 fractured kingdoms. Welcome to the age of Gakukuyo, the low overthrowing the high. It sounds poetic, but it's brutal in practice. The rules are shifting again, and not just for nobles. A clever farmer with ambition can seize a castle. A servant with a sharp sword can become a master. You walk into one such castle, more rough-hewn, flying a new banner you don't recognize. The lord, once a humble retainer, now calls himself governor of the province. His men are loyal, his sword is sharp. You ask him how he rose. He laughs. Simple, he says. I didn't ask permission. Historians still argue whether this period was anarchic or entrepreneurial. You sipsake with a monk who insists it was creative destruction, like clearing a forest to make a garden. Another scholar scoffs. It was wolves eating each other with lacquered chopsticks. You believe both. You find yourself in Kazuke province, staying in a fortified temple-turned militia post. Head monk wears armor beneath his robes. He leads prayers in the morning and trains spearmen in the afternoon. You ask if it's blasphemy. He shrugs. The Buddha understands. What emerges in this chaos isn't just violence, it's innovation. Fortresses evolve, sprouting high stone walls and watchtowers. You witness a castle town under construction, where carpenters, blacksmiths, and rice vendors work side by side with Ashigaru foot soldiers in iron helmets. Commerce flourishes in the shadow of war. You spot a young samurai teaching swordplay to peasants, unheard of a generation ago. But now, desperate times invite desperate alliances. Peasants become soldiers, monks become generals, honor becomes negotiable. You walk through a burned village, one of many caught in a daimyo dispute over a river. A child picks through the remains, finds a half-melted mirror, and smiles as if it's treasure. You feel something twist inside you, but not everything is bleak in the chaos. The samurai identity sharpens, tested daily in the crucible of survival. No longer simply hereditary lords, they must now prove themselves, on battlefield, in diplomacy. In loyalty, you meet a woman named Shizuka, the captain of a garrison defending a mountain pass. She greets you with the confidence of a man twice her age. Her armor is battered, her sword well used. You ask how she commands so many. They follow me, she says, because I keep them alive. Titles don't matter when arrows are flying. She teaches you how to fletch arrows by lamplight, how to gauge wind with a single breath, how to sharpen a tanto blade using the water's reflection. Any fool can wield a sword, she says. The question is whether they deserve to. You realize that the samurai spirit is not in ceremony, but in conduct. And this age, though lawless, has become a crucible of merit over birth. Still, beneath it all, the cracks widen. The Ashikaga shogunate does little. A new puppet shogun is installed every few years. Some never even hold a sword. Kyoto becomes less a capital than a battlefield. The city burns, rebuilds, burns again. You walk its streets at dusk and hear no poetry. A quiet rush of water carrying ash downstream. One night, you speak with a traveling merchant who carries silk, salt, and secrets. He tells you of a new man rising in the east. A wild one, he says, from the Owari province. Not a noble, not even refined, but fierce, clever, ruthless. He leans in. They call him Oda Nobunaga. You feel the wind change, and though the cherry blossoms bloom as they always have, something in the air tells you the storm is coming again. You hear the thunder before you see it, not from the sky, but from hoofbeats, the pounding drums of war echoing across the plains of Owari. Dust rises in great clouds. Blades flash like lightning, and at the center of the storm is a name you've heard whispered with awe, fear, and something close to disbelief. Oda Nobunaga. You've arrived in the heart of the Sengoku, Feudal Japan's warring states, period, and it's every bit as chaotic as the rumors warned. Castles are now commonplace, bristling with spikes and cannons. Armies number in the tens of thousands. Villagers flip allegiance like banners in the wind. Peace is a ghost. Power is God and Nobunaga. He is the storm made flesh. You first see him at a distance, surveying a battlefield with casual detachment. He wears a crimson surcoat over his armor, no crest, no flare, just red like blood before it's spilled. Around him, generals wait in silence, their breath caught in the gravity of his presence. You're not sure whether he's brilliant or insane, maybe both, historians still debate whether Nobunaga was a tyrant or a visionary. Some call him the demon king, others the unifier. One thing is clear, he plays by no one's rules but his own. He revolutionizes warfare. You witness his forces use arquebuses, matchlock firearms, recently introduced by Portuguese traders in disciplined volleys that tear through charging cavalry. The old samurai method of single combat, outdated. Nobunaga fights with formations, ambushes, gunpowder. He turns strategy into science. One of his officers, a young samurai named Hideyoshi, tells you over salted plum wine, the old way was pride, our way is results. And Nobunaga gets results. You watch him crush the Imagawa clan at Okayazama, despite being outnumbered 10-1. He uses weather, terrain, and sheer unpredictability. I want them to think I'm mad, he says. That way, they'll never see me coming. You believe him. He conquers without apology. He burns Buddhist strongholds that oppose him, even sacred Mount Heian, slaughtering warrior monks who dared defy his path. The country gasps. You stand in the blackened ruins and smell incense beneath the ash. A monk beside you weeps silently. He fights the gods, he says. You reply, then the gods should have trained harder. It's harsh, but not inaccurate. Rise is as much psychological as it is military. He changes how people think. He promotes by merit, not bloodline. You see a peasant turned general walking beside nobles, their swords equal. In his court, tea ceremonies are followed by war councils. Merchants gain influence. Art flourishes under the shadow of steel, and yet, there's always tension. You travel with one of Nobunaga's supply caravans. At every stop, farmers bow deeply. But it's not reverence, it's terror. You hear stories of villagers wiped out for aiding his enemies, of entire families executed. To make a point, of soldiers forced to dig their own graves for discipline. Nobunaga demands loyalty, but not love. Still, the land begins to change. Roads are safer, at least those under his banner. Markets swell with foreign goods. You walk through the port of Sakai and hear Portuguese, Chinese, even Dutch voices. You taste sugar for the first time. You hold a telescope. You watch Christian missionaries debate Zen monks under red lanterns. It's dizzying. One evening, you attend a performance of No Theatre sponsored by Nobunaga himself. He sits alone, unmoving, as a masked dancer performs a tale of betrayal and revenge. At the final bow, he stands, claps once, and leaves. You ask a court official what he thought. He liked the ending, the man replies, but said it needed more fire. Later, you walk with Hideyoshi, now Nobunaga's most trusted man. He speaks of the vision, a united Japan, one rule, one path, no more clan wars, no more fractured courts, no more asking permission, he says. You ask what comes after that. Hideyoshi smiles faintly. Then we go further. You're not sure what he means, but something in his eyes tells you the story isn't finished. Not even close. As you leave the Oda camp at dawn, the sky breaks into fire-orange light. Behind you, horns. Sound. Riders move. The next battle begins. You walk faster. The warring states are far from over, but one man just might end them. Smoke curls from the forge like incense, thick and warm, clinging to your skin and the back of your throat. You stand inside a low, timber-bird workshop tucked in the mountains of Busan province. Hammers ring in steady rhythm, echoing like temple. Bells across the valley. Sparks dance like fireflies in the half-dark. You've come to the hearth where legends are made. This is where swords are born. You've seen blades, before on battlefields, on dojo walls, in the trembling hands of peasants, forced to fight. But here, in the glowing belly of the forge, you begin to understand the reverence the samurai hold for their weapons. This isn't manufacturing, it's ritual. The swordsmith, a gaunt man named Yasuke, works with the concentration of a monk and the precision of a surgeon. His arms are lean with muscle, his hands steady despite the heat. Beside him stands his apprentice, whose only job for now is to keep the fire alive. If the heat dies, Yasuke murmurs, the blade dies with it. You watch as he begins the process, folding steel, hammering it flat, folding again, over and over, up to 15 times, until the grain of the metal runs tight and fine like silk. This process isn't just for strength, it's for balance. The perfect sword, he tells you, must be both hard and soft. Too brittle, it shatters. Too soft, it bends. A blade, Yasuke says, must survive its own purpose. You think about that for a while. The katana is no mere weapon in this world. It is an identity, a symbol, a reflection of its wielder's soul. You've heard samurai recite their sword's name before entering battle. You've seen them weep when a blade is broken, as though mourning a sibling. Historians still argue over when the katana took on such spiritual weight. Some trace it to early legends of smiths who prayed over each blade. Others say it solidified during the Sengoku era, when carrying a sword meant walking with both life and death in hand. But here, in the forge, there's no debate. You feel it in the heat, in the hush that settles between hammer strikes. You travel from Busan to Seiki, another renowned smithing town. Along the way, you stop at a small shrine where a samurai kneels before an altar, his blade laid out like an offering. You ask what he's praying for. Alignment, he says, of hand, heart, and steel. In Seiki, you witness polishers at work specialists who take weeks to finish a single sword. They don't just sharpen the edge, they reveal the blade's hamon, the ghostly temper line that swirls like smoke frozen in metal. One polisher shows you a blade with a wave pattern and smiles proudly. This one, he says, sings when drawn. You try to lift it. It hums, just faintly. There's beauty in every detail. The tsuba or handguard, often shaped like dragons, or cherry blossoms. The suka, wrapped in rayskin and silk, carefully fitted to the hand. Even the manukitini ornaments tucked beneath the grip carry meaning. Luck charms, family crests, symbols of gods or demons. You meet a noble woman who collects swords not for battle, but for art. She shows you one gifted to her great-grandfather by a warlord whose castle no longer stands. This blade outlived his enemies, she says, and his legacy. You nod, running your fingers along the lacquered scabbard. You realize that in Japan, the sword does more than cut it remembers. But swords aren't only made in forges. Some are born on battlefields. You journey to a small province where a young swordsmith named Toro collects broken weapons from fallen samurai. He melts them down, reforges them into new blades. You ask if that's disrespectful. He shakes his head. Better to fight again than rot in the dirt. You watch him blend the shattered steel with new iron, chanting softly under his breath as he folds the past into the present. One evening, you find yourself in a mountainside dojo, watching students practice Iojutsu, the art of drawing, and striking in one motion. Their blades flash from their scabbards with shocking speed. The master, a stern man with cloud-grey eyes, explains that the moment of decision to draw or not to draw's the essence of the samurai life. Every time a sword is unsheathed, he says, a truth must follow. You leave the mountains, carrying a tonta's maul, sharp and newly forged by Yasuke himself. Its name, he tells you, is Kagero Heat Haze. He bows deeply, as if passing you more than a weapon, and in a way, he is. As you walk down the wooded trail, the weight of the blade against your hip feels familiar already. Not threatening, but steady. A whisper rather than a roar. Because now you understand, a sword is not just for war, it's for honor, memory, and silence. And in the hands of the samurai, it becomes something more than metal. It becomes meaning. The air tastes of ash again, but this time, it isn't from a forge. It's from a dozen burning fields behind you, smoke climbing into the pale sky like dark banners. You stand on a narrow ridge overlooking a battlefield that sprawls for miles warriors. Like ants, their banners flapping in waves. The clamor of steel a constant hum. You've entered the true heart of the Sengoku, Jediotha Warring States period, a time where the rules have fully collapsed, and Japan has become a of warlords. Every province is a fortress. Every hilltop bristles with watchtowers. Every farmer knows how to use a spear. You walk through burned villages, past blackened rice paddies and mass graves. The soil here is rich to rich with the blood of ambition. And ambition, in this era, wears many faces. You travel first with the forces of Takada Shingen, known as the Tiger of Kai. His banners bear the characters Frinkazan, wind, forest, fire, mountain, a creed drawn from Sun Tzu, swift as wind, silent as forest, fierce as fire, immovable as mountain. You witness his cavalry charge, an awe-inspiring blur of hooves. And steel.shingen is brilliant, refined, and deadly. His soldiers respect him, fear him, even love him. He keeps order with an iron fist wrapped in silk. Then, a week later, you ride with Uesugi Kenshin, the dragon of Akigo's greatest rival. Where Shingen is pragmatic, Kenshin is devout a samurai who prays before every battle, claiming his cause is justice. He keeps a statue of Bishamonten, the god of war, in his tent. You see the two armies clash at Kawanakajima again and again. Neither truly wins, yet both emerge as legends. Historians still argue over these encounters. Who outwitted whom? Who could have won if not for fog or fate? You just remember the sound, the beat of war drums, the clash of ideals wrapped in steel, and then there is chaos. Because, as these giants battle, smaller daimyo rise all around them. You meet men who once tilled soil and now wear armor. You pass a peasant boy dragging a broken naginata taller than he is. You find mercenaries switching sides, mid-campaigns, sometimes mid-battle. The Ashigaru, once considered expendable foot soldiers, are now essential. They wield spears, guns, and ambition. One grins at you as he sharpens his blade. This age doesn't care who your father was, he says, only how well you fight. You realize the samurai class is changing, again evolving from aristocratic warriors to battlefield pragmatists. And for every noble lord with a family crest, there are 10 swords for hire who've learned to kill without poetry. One such man is Masanobu, a ronin who offers to guide you across the front. He's fought for 6 lords in 2 years. Over sake, he tells you the code of bushidō is a good dream but not very profitable. Yet, when ambushed on a forest road by bandits, you watch Masanobu fight with elegance, fury, and mercy. He disables one attacker with a strike to the leg, then leaves him food. When you ask why, he shrugs. A dog bites when it's hungry. Feed him, and he remembers your scent. Even in war, he carries something of the old samurai spirit, tattered but still breathing. You arrive next in Osaka, where fortresses rise, like mountains of stone and wood, designed to withstand weeks, even months, of siege. Warfare is no longer about dual sits, about logistics, food, water, gunpowder, patience. The generals now hold war councils with maps, not poems. You hear them debate terrain, alliances, weather patterns. One daimyo, before an invasion, pauses to consult a tea master. If I cannot calm my heart, he says, how can I lead others to war? You sip bitter matcha and wonder if you're still in the same world you walked into weeks ago. Historians often describe the Sengoku period as lawless, ruthless, and yes, it is. But it's also full of clarity. Everyone knows the stakes. No one hides behind rituals. Strength is tested, alliances are earned, and weakness, well, it doesn't last long. One evening, you stand on a ridge as fires burn across 5 different provinces. You can't even keep track of who's fighting whom anymore. Below, a procession of monks walks through the battlefield's edge, ringing bells and chanting for the dead. You ask one why they bother. We ring so that souls can find peace, he says. Even if the living have forgotten how. And perhaps they have. But the samurai, they endure, hardened, focused, covered in dust and blood, but still walking upright, still fighting, and somewhere, in the smoke-choked distance, you know that Oda Nobunaga still advances. The warring states continue, but so does the march toward unification. You smell fire before you see it, thick, oily smoke curling into the heavens, chased by the cries of men and the crackle of burning wood. You've come to Kyoto, or what's left of it. It's under siege, again, this time. The flames carry the name of Oda Nobunaga, and he's not knocking at the gate. He's already inside. You walk through the smoldering streets, ash clinging to your robes. The temples burn, the old palaces crumble, and amid the ruins stands a man in armor trimmed with gold leaf, his expression impassive as smoke curls around. His helmet Nobunaga has arrived. He's taken Kyoto, seized control of the emperor, and now claims to rule in his name, though everyone knows. It's his voice that echoes through the capital's halls. Historians still debate whether he intended to restore Kyoto's greatness or simply replace it with his own legacy. You suspect both. You follow his retinue north to Mount Heian, the ancient home of the warrior monks of the Tendai sect. These monks once challenged Nobunaga's authority, harbored his enemies, and defied his orders. He responds with fire. You witness it. Thousands of soldiers surround the mountain, cutting off every path. Monks in crimson robes flee into the forests. Others draw blades and fall where they stand. The temples rich with centuries of prayer, scrolls, and art are reduced to glowing ruins. The flames leap skyward, as if trying to burn the very memory of resistance. A soldier beside you, face streaked with soot, murmurs, even the gods tremble when Nobunaga passes. You don't disagree, but Nobunaga isn't all fury. He's also vision. You walk with him, yes. Walk with him through his latest project, the construction of Azuchi Castle, a fortress palace like none before it, towering, glittering, covered in colored tiles and gold. It defies the grey stone grimness of past citadels. This is not just for war, he tells his advisors. This is for legacy. You stand in the unfinished audience hall, marveling at the painted walls, dragons, cranes, cherry blossoms, and realize Nobunaga is trying to create a new Japan, one of order, discipline, and unshakable authority. He abolishes toll roads. He opens ports to foreign trade. He invites Jesuit missionaries and listens to them speak of God and salvation. You watch a black-robed priest present him with a European clock, which he studies like a puzzle. I respect precision, he says, and firepower. You walk beside matchlock gunners as they train outside a castle town. Nobunaga has embraced firearms like no one else. He arms entire divisions with them, changing the nature of samurai warfare forever. Gone is the age of single combat, now lines of infantry fire in rotating volleys. You witness a drill where samurai archers fall to men with guns and ashigaru uniforms. One veteran turns to you, eyes hollow. Honor is a slower bullet. Yet Nobunaga doesn't reject the old ways entirely. He still employs traditional samurai. He still respects bushidō in his own way, but he sees it for what it is, a code that must bend or break. You attend a war council in a lacquered chamber. Nobunaga listens more than he speaks. His generals argue. Some want to destroy the remnants of the Takeda clan. Others urge patience. Nobunaga holds up a single brushstroke on rice paper. Just one word. Control. That's his philosophy. Not peace. Not power. Control, dot and not. Everyone likes it. You hear whispers, discontent, fear. Even among his allies, there's unease. He burns too hot. One samurai mutters to you. Even the brightest fire dies in smoke. Still, Nobunaga presses on. He crushes the Takeda. He seizes central Japan. He elevates commoners like Toyotomi Hideyoshi. His enemies fall like dominoes. But in private moments rare, silent you sense something else. Not arrogance, not rage, but urgency. Nobunaga is a man racing against something. Time, fate, the ghosts of every system he's burned. One evening, you see him gazing from a tower window, watching the lake reflect torchlight. They won't remember the blood, he says softly. They'll remember who brought order. And maybe he's right. But as you leave the castle, the wind shifts. And, for the first time, you wonder, when fire spreads this far, can even the one who lit it escape the flames? You're woken in the night by hushed footsteps, whispers like rustling silk, and the faint scent of incense masking something far sharper blood. The air in Honnoji Temple is too still. You slip from your sleeping mat and press yourself against the wooden screen. Outside, shadows move like spectres, and the red glow on the horizon is not dawn, it's firelight. Then you hear it, rebellion. Mitsuhide has turned. In one heartbeat, everything changes. It's 1582, and you're inside the final chapter of Oda Nobunaga's legend. He came to Honnogi with only a handful of guards, expecting peace. Instead, he walked straight into betrayal by one of his own generals. Akechi, Mitsuhide, a man he once trusted. You see Nobunaga's retainers scramble, half-armored, blades drawn. Some fall immediately, cut down in the corridor. Others vanish into the chaos, and Nobunaga, he doesn't run. You glimpse him through the smoke standing tall in full battle attire, sword in hand, back to the burning altar. His face is lit by firelight, jaw set, eyes unblinking. He's surrounded, outnumbered, trapped, he knows it. Historians still debate whether he died by enemy blade or his own hand, choosing ritual suicide seppuku rather than capture. but you're close enough to hear his final roar. The empire is mine no longer. And then silence. Flames swallow Hanoji. The man who dared to shape Japan in his own image is gone. But the fire he lit, it doesn't die. You flee Kyoto with other witnesses, your path lit by torchlight and questions. Why did Mitsuhide betray him? Some say insult, others ambition. Maybe he simply feared Nobunaga had grown too powerful to uncontrollable. But Mitsuhide barely enjoys his victory. Within days, he's hunted down by Toyotomi Hideyoshi, Nobunaga's sharpest blade and most cunning vassal. And now, the spotlight turns. You catch up with Hideyoshi's forces as they chase Mitsuhide across Yamazaki. It isn't a war, it's a reckoning. Hideyoshi's troops, moving with stunning speed, catch Mitsuhide's army while it's still gathering strength. You watch the Battle of Yamazaki unfold from a hillside covered in reeds and broken arrows. The sun burns red above as troops falter. Hideyoshi's command is flawless flanking, feinting, crushing dot by sunset. It's over. A peasant claims to have found Mitsuhide's body in a ditch, pierced with spears. Others say he escaped, lived in disguise. The truth, it hardly matters. Hideyoshi doesn't let the moment go to waste. He moves, quickly, masterfully, calming Nobunaga's grieving allies, absorbing their support. He swears he seeks only to continue. His master's vision, but you see it in his eyes. He has his own, and it's different. You follow him to Osaka, where he begins constructing a castle unlike anything Japan has seen. Massive stone foundations, glimmering towers, lacquered gates wide enough for elephants, though none exist in Japan. You hear a courtier murmur. It's not a castle, it's a statement. And that's exactly what it is. Hideyoshi, born a peasant, now commands armies, lords, land. He is unthinkable, unprecedented, and entirely unstoppable. He rewards merit, not blood. You see Ashigaru made generals. You see tea-masters granted estates. You see women given voice at courts, even negotiating trade deals. Everything old is up for negotiation. Still, the samurai grumble. There's no place for pride in his order, one says to you. Only usefulness. You follow Hideyoshi on campaign after campaign. He outmaneuvers rivals with silver as often as steel. He persuades, absorbs, and annihilates. One clan refuses his offer, they vanish by spring. But Hideyoshi is not just a warrior, he's a builder of systems. You witness the sword hunter's sweeping decree that all peasants surrender their weapons. We must divide warrior from worker, he proclaims. You watch men bury their blades beneath floorboards. Others melt them into plowshares. A few refuse and vanish without a trace. You speak with a blacksmith whose forge has cooled. He wants peace, the man says, but only his peace. Hideyoshi also begins land surveys, building a registry of who owns what, how much rice they grow, who pays what tax. You sit in a village, as his scribes count every grain in every sack. It's impressive, efficient, inescapable. And then most stunningly, he claims the unclaimable. He declares himself regent to the emperor. Not a shogun, he wasn't born, something even rarer. A commoner commanding nobles. You watch the court bow, reluctantly, unwillingly, but they bow. You ask a senior samurai what he thinks. He rose like smoke. The man says, no one saw where he began, and now we can't grasp him. You nod, because you've seen Nobunaga burn the old world down. Hideyoshi builds something new from the ash dot. It is not perfect, but it is powerful, and the samurai, they now serve a man who once carried a general's sandals. The warring states may soon end, but not without one final reckoning. You stand at the docks of Nagasaki, and the world smells foreign. The sea is heavy with salt and smoke, but also something new: gunpowder, cloves, foreign sweat, and cinnamon. Tall ships creak at anchor, their hulls strange and broad, painted with symbols you've never seen before. Jesuit crosses gleam in the sun, flags of Portugal, of Spain, of the unknown. You're watching Hideyoshi's Japan open its eyes wider than ever before. Merchants haggle in multiple languages. You hear Japanese, Portuguese, Chinese, and something else you can't place. European priests in black robes pass by samurai in lacquered armor. One hands out tiny crucifixes to children. Another debates a Buddhist monk under a willow tree. This, you realize, is not a border town. It is a gate one Hideyoshi built, and one he may soon slam shut. Hideyoshi once welcomed the foreigners. He tolerated Christianity, even let his samurai convert. Some hoped he might embrace it himself, but something's changed. You see it in his face older now, sharper, suspicious. You attend one of his tea ceremonies, hosted in a tranquil garden in Kyoto. Its beautiful flowers arranged like poetry, steam rising from painted bowls. But beneath the calm, there's tension. He turns to a missionary and asks, softly, "Do you think your God is greater than our emperor?" The missionary hesitates. Hideyoshi smiles, and that's the beginning of the end. Within weeks, he issues the Christian expulsion edict. Foreign priests are ordered to leave. Churches are closed. Converts are harassed. Some go underground. Others burn their faith along with their crosses. Historians still debate why. Some say Hideyoshi feared religious rebellion. Others say he resented any loyalty that wasn't to him. You suspect it was both. But faith isn't the only frontier he's tampering with, because now, impossibly, Hideyoshi wants Korea. You read the orders with your own eyes. Samurai are being gathered, supplies prepared, ships built. Hideyoshi, drunk on victory and perhaps on ego, believes he can conquer Ming China's, darting by marching through Korea. You speak to a general who's been drafted. He believes this will be his legacy, the man says, staring at his sake cup. I think it may be his ruin. In 1592, the invasion begins. You travel with the first wave. Samurai land on the Korean peninsula with shocking speed, overwhelming. Local defenses. They take city after city. Castles fall. Korean forces, stunned by the efficiency and firepower, retreat. It seems, at first, like another Hideyoshi masterstroke, but the deeper they push, the harder it becomes. Korean guerrilla. Fighters resist fiercely, and then the real wall appears. China intervenes. The Ming dynasty sends troops. The tide turns. You watch morale shift like smoke in the wind. Disease spreads, supplies thin, and worst of all, Korean Admiral Yi Sun-sin, with only a handful of turtle ships, begins shattering Japanese naval lines. You meet samurai who have been fighting in muddy hills for months without orders or food. One carves tally marks into the pommel of his sword. For every day he forgets us, he says. So far, 53. Back in Japan, Hideyoshi rages. He sends more troops, more rice, more promises. But Korea becomes a bottomless pit, swallowing glory and lives alike. You return to Osaka Castle and find Hideyoshi aging quickly. his once smooth ambition now cracked with desperation. He holds his newborn son, Hideyori, with trembling hands. This child, he says, must inherit a land at peace. He begins sending envoys to negotiate withdrawal quietly, of course. He cannot be seen to lose. But even he knows the campaign has failed. His dream of empire dies on foreign soil, and now he turns inward. He tightens the caste system, samurai, farmers, artisans, merchants. He forbids movement between classes. A farmer must farm. A warrior must fight, he declares. Order before ambition. He builds new roads, new policies, new taxes. You watch a blacksmith's son weep as he's told he cannot become a scribe. You meet a merchant who wears silk richer than any general, but still bows low, forever beneath the warrior's foot, and yet, somehow, Hideyoshi holds it all together. You visit a remote village where the rice flows, the taxes are paid, and the night is quiet. A local lord raises a toast to peace after so many storms. You wonder how long it will last, because Hideyoshi is dying. Whispers spread, his hair thins, his voice cracks, his court grows tense, and he has one problem left: succession. His only heir, Hideyori, is still a child, and there are many who remember Nobunaga's blade. You walk once more through Osaka Castle. The halls are quiet now. Hideyoshi sits alone with a fan, staring at a painting of the sea. He doesn't speak to you, but you hear him whisper, "I ruled without blood, but not without cost." Then he closes his eyes, and Japan holds its breath. The gates of Osaka Castle close behind you with a thud like a sealing tomb. Toyotomi Hideyoshi is dead, and the moment his ashes cool, the vultures begin to circle. The boy he left behind, Hideyori, still a child, is surrounded by regents sworn to protect him. But oaths, in this age, are made of parchment, not stone, and one man steps forward to claim what he believes is his by merit, cunning, and sheer inevitability. Tokugawa Ieyasu, you've heard his name whispered in campaign tents and tea-houses for years. Quiet, patient, distant. But now the fox has bared its fangs. Ieyasu had served both Nobunaga and Hideyoshi carefully. Strategically, he never challenged them. But he always watched, waiting now, with Hideyoshi gone and the child heir too small to wield power. Ieyasu sees an opening. You travel with his growing forces eastward, toward the Kanto region, where he gathers men and pledges from minor daimyo. His words are soft, his promises generous, his eyes cold, calculating. He is like a river. One general says, still on the surface, but deep enough to drown you. Not everyone accepts his claim to power. The Toyotomi loyalists, led by Ishida Mitsunari, challenge him. You watch the land fracture again. Castles garrisoned, roads blockaded, spies whispering through shrines and brothels alike. The tension builds, and then it snaps. You stand on the edge of the wide Sekigahara plain in autumn, the morning mist curling round the thousands of soldiers, gathering for what will become the largest samurai battle in history. It is 1600, and Japan is choosing its master. The two sides face each other in Fogashida Mitsunari's Western Army to the left, Tokugawa Ieyasu's Eastern Army to the right. You walk between the ranks, feeling the nervous energy. Men fidget with armor ties, some murmur prayers. One carves his name into the shaft of a yari spear. You ask a grizzled veteran who he fights for. Not who, he says. What, a future? With one head or 1,000? The battle begins with a roar. Arrows blot the sky. drums thunder, cavalry surge through rice fields turned to mud. You see entire regiments vanish into smoke. The air is filled with the screaming of men, the hiss of steel, the wet sound of endings. But it is treachery that decides the day. One of Mitsunari's key, Alisko Bayaka Hideaki turns. He'd been waiting on the hill, wavering. Then, with a yell, he switches sides mid-battle, charging into the back of Mitsunari's line. You see the Western army crumble, collapse, flee. Mitsunari is captured, dragged through the mud. Executed days later, the mist lifts. Tokugawa Ieyasu stands victorious. You attend the aftermath in Kyoto. Nobles and daimyo kneel before him, one after another. They know the tide has turned. They know the fox has won. In 1603, the emperor powerless, but still sacred grants Ieyasu the title of Sei. Tishigan, you are present when the ink dries. The Tokugawa shogunate is born, and you realize this is different. Ieyasu isn't like Nobunaga with his fire, or Hideyoshi with his energy. He is stillness weaponized. He values patience, structure, and obedience above all else. You see it unfold rapidly. Loyal daimyo are given choice land. Enemies are relocated, weakened, watched. The Sankenkatai system is proposed, requiring lords to alternate years living in Edo, leaving their families behind as hostages of peace. You visit the newly growing city of Edo, once a fishing village, now transforming into the heart of the shogun's domain. Wide roads, moated castles, wooden towers rising like bamboo. Ieyasu doesn't just want to rule, he wants to last. He enforces social order with bureaucratic precision. The samurai are now a bureaucratic class, many more involved in tax and law than in warfare. Farmers farm, merchants sell, artisans build. Movement between classes is forbidden. Even religion is tightly controlled. Christianity, briefly tolerated, is banned again, seen as a foreign wedge. You speak with a Christian peasant in secret. He hides a small wooden crucifix inside a rice ball. We pray with our eyes now, he says. You visit Osaka again. Hidori, now grown, is still there, cloistered in his castle. You sense the inevitable, and it comes in 1615 with the siege of Osaka. Ieyasu, now officially retired but still pulling every string, launches a full assault. Cannon fire, starvation, subterfuge. When it ends, Hidori and his mother commit seppuku. Osaka burns. The Toyotomi line ends. You watch Ieyasu return to Edo. He moves slowly now, age tugging at his frame, but the fire in his gaze is undimmed. He has done what no one else could: unite Japan and keep it united. Historians call Sekigahara the end of the Sengoku period. But you, having walked its every step, know it didn't end with a bang. It ended with a stillness, and within that stillness, a new Japan begins to breathe. The roads are straight now. You notice it as you journey across the Japanese countryside. The bends are fewer, the checkpoints more frequent, the silence deeper. The war drums are gone. The clang of steel replaced by the clip-clop of officials on horseback and the rustle of ledgers being unrolled at way stations. It's the early 1600s, and Tokugawa Ieyasu's peace has settled like snow, quiet, cold, and absolute. Welcome to the Edo period, where the samurai now bow more often than they draw. You arrive in Edo, no longer a fishing village but a shining seat of power, rising fast with meticulous precision. Moats gleam in the morning sun. The city is alive with order. Every merchant knows their place. Every daimyo obeys the flow of sankinkatai, alternate attendance of policy, that compels them to leave their families in Edo as de facto hostages, while they march back and forth to their provincial lands each year, bleeding their coffers dry. You watch the process unfold like a ritualized dance of obedience. Daimyo processions stretch for miles, retainers, soldiers, servants, even concubines, all wearing matching colors. Flags flutter, drums sound. But it's not war they march for now, it's submission. You sit in on one such court visit, watching a proud lord kneel before the shogun's representative, forced to offer gifts and platitudes. His voice is even, but his jaw clenches. When he rises, he bows so low you can see the tops of his calloused hands shake. The samurai are no longer just warriors. They are administrators, tax collectors, paper pushers in armor. You meet one in a small Edo tea house. He's dressed immaculately, 2 swords on his belt, of course, but he speaks not of jewels, but grain quotas. You ask when he last drew his blade. He chuckles. Last year, to cut a plum branch. You laugh with him. But later, you watch him polish that sword with painstaking care, as though it still mattered. And it does, because for the samurai, the sword isn't just a weapon anymore, it's a symbol, a reminder of who they were. Historians still argue whether this bureaucratization of the samurai class saved or diluted them. Some say it was necessary to preserve peace. Others call it the slow, elegant death of the warrior soul. You see both sides. You travel into the countryside and visit castle towns where ronin, masterless samurai, now roam. Not all fit into Ieyasu's system. Some refuse. Some were dismissed when their lords fell from grace. Others simply don't belong in a world where the sword is more ornament than obligation. You meet one named Katsuro, ragged but he earns his keep teaching swordsmanship in a barn and writing haiku for the local inn. His poem, scratched on a sake napkin, reads, "Once a roaring flame, now I warm rice. Sharpen ink, but I still bow east." You share sake with him under the stars. He tells you the worst part of peace isn't boredom, it's irrelevance. Once we chose when to die, he says. Now we're told when to smile. Not all ronin are so poetic. You hear of some turning to crime, mercenary work, or gambling. One town you pass through has hired a former samurai to guard a warehouse. Of textiles, a man who once led cavalry now chases off silk thieves. Still, the order of Tokugawa rule is hard to argue with. Roads are safe, trade flourishes, villages grow, literacy spreads. You see children reciting Confucian texts. You see kabuki theaters bursting with laughter. You see farmers with full bellies for the first time in generations. But everything has a cost. You notice the strict class separation. Peasants here, merchants there, samurai above, but increasingly dependent on borrowed money. Merchants grow, wealthy in coin, yet remain socially beneath the sword. Samurai grow poor in rice, yet walk with heads high. It's a fiction everyone agrees to live in. One merchant tells you they wear armor. I wear silk. They demand respect. I demand payment. Still, he bows when a samurai passes. Deeply and above it all, in Edo Castle, the Tokugawa family rules with stillness. No war, no rebellion, just protocols, punishments, and the steady rhythm of control. You visit the shrine where Tokugawa Ieyasu is enshrined as a kami, a divine spirit. Pilgrims come to offer incense and prayers, not just for peace, but for continuity. And that is Ieyasu's true legacy. He didn't just end the wars, he ended the age of becoming. No more self-made lords. No more rise through blood and ambition. From now on, everything has its place. And if you don't like your place, well, you bow anyway. As you leave Edo, you pass a procession of children marching with bamboo swords, chanting the tales of Minamoto and Oda. Their blades are toys, but their pride is real. You wonder what they see in the word samurai now. A warrior, a clerk, a memory, maybe all of it. The age of conquest is over, but the echo of the sword still rings. You walk beneath cherry blossoms. Their petals drift down like slow rain, catching in your hair and on the shoulders of your kimono. A monk sweeps the temple steps nearby, his straw broom whispering across the stone. Somewhere, a child giggles. Somewhere else, a bamboo flute plays a tune older than memory. It's the mid-1600s, and Japan is more beautiful and more still than ever. But beneath that stillness, a crack. You feel it first in the taverns of Edo, where merchants grow bold. With wealth and say, they speak of new ships being spotted offshore, of letters from Nagasaki, of a rebellion in the south. You raise an eyebrow, rebellion. It starts with a whisper in Shimabara, a coastal domain far from the capital. The peasants there are Christian. Converts, many former warriors, all taxed beyond human endurance. Their local daimyo bleeds them for coin. When the taxes rise again, this time for the construction of a new castle, they finally snap. You make your way south and find a region in flames. The peasants rise with whatever they can find, farming tools, stolen swords, even bamboo spears. They seize castles, hoist Christian banners, and begin what will be remembered as the Shimabara Rebellion. You meet their leader, Amakusa Sure, a teenage boy with long hair, pale robes, and eyes that shine with eerie calm. He claims divine visions. Some believe he's the next Christ. Others just see a symbol. He's not a warrior, one rebel tells you. He's a flame. You're granted a brief audience with Sure. He's soft-spoken, serene. Faith is sharper than steel, he says, and suffering breeds soldiers. Historians still argue whether the rebellion was truly religious or mostly economic. But you see both in the eyes of the fighter's rage and hope braided together. The shogunate responds. With fire, you watch as over 125,000 troops march on Shimabara. The rebellion is crushed with brutal efficiency. The rebels are cornered in Hera Castle, besieged for months. When it falls, the executions are swift and total. Tens of thousands men, women, even children are slaughtered. You walk the blood-soaked fields days later. Charred crucifixes lie in the mud. A single rosary clings to a burnt fence post. Christianity is now utterly outlawed. Missionaries are expelled. Converts are hunted. Villagers must trample images of Christ to prove their loyalty. Fumi, they're called. You watch one old man hesitate too long. The magistrate frowns. He disappears into the prison within the hour. The policy of national seclusion tightens like a noose. Ports are closed. Foreigners are banned, save for a handful of Dutch and Chinese merchants restricted to a man-made island in Nagasaki called Dejima. You visit it, a curious, quiet cage of culture, where goods flow but ideas are filtered. A Japanese translator holds a foreign book with tongs. Reading it through a cloth, nothing enters unexamined now. You speak with a samurai official tasked with monitoring Dej. We do not hate knowledge, he says. We just do not trust its hands. It's a strange paradox. A land so isolated and yet so refined, because inside its shell, Japan begins to bloom in other ways. You attend a no masks, slow motion, flute music like wind through pine. Later, you stumble into a rowdy kabuki theater where actors strut in wild makeup and samurai yell at the stage. You sip sake under lanterns painted with woodblock scenes of lovers, ghosts, and heroic suicides. The arts flourish, so do the ways of the warrior. Though no longer through battle, you watch young samurai recite from manuals like the Hogakure and Go-Rin no-Sho, books that turn swordsmanship into philosophy. They speak of dying well, of service without ego, of detachment. One tells you, we have no more battles to win, so we train to defeat the self. He slices a candle in half mid-air with his katana. Then he bows and returns to tea duty. There's elegance in it. Yes, but also restlessness. Samurai who once defined themselves through chaos now struggle to define themselves through routine. Their lions asked to garden, and not all adapt. You visit a domain where a young ronin has taken to painting ink landscapes. Their beautiful sweeping mountains, twisted pines, cranes in flight, but each one hides a tiny figure, always alone, always walking away from something. He tells you he can't paint anything else. You can take the sword from a man, he says, but not the silence after the sword. And so Japan endures, locked from the world, held together by rituals, rice, and rules. The samurai walk in gardens instead of battlefields. Merchants count coins behind sliding screens. Farmers bow to the wind, and somewhere beyond the horizon, ships wait, watching. It begins with a whisper, then a ripple, and finally a wave. You stand atop a windswept cliff overlooking the Pacific. The horizon is peaceful blue and infinite, but beneath that calm, you know, change is sailing toward Japan again. The year is 1853, and the world has grown loud while Japan has stayed quiet for over 2 centuries. The Tokugawa shogunate's Sokoku policy national seclusion has kept foreign ships at bay and samurai. Culture preserved like lacquered armor behind glass. But the West has found its cannons, and they are coming. You feel it before you see it. The rumble of foreign steamships like beasts from another world. They appear off the coast of Araga Blackhold, smoke-belching, ironclad monsters. The locals call them Carafuan, the black ships. On board one of them is Commodore Matthew Perry, an American with a stiff hat, a stiff walk, and very unstiff intentions. He carries a letter from President Millard Fillmore, demanding Japan open its ports to trade. You're there when he steps ashore, flanked by sailors and marines. The Tokugawa officials greet him stiffly, cautiously. Behind them, hidden in the pine trees, you spot archers. They won't be used, but their hands don't leave the bows. Perry doesn't flinch. He presents the letter with the pomp of a theater actor, then sails away, promising to return with more ships. Spoiler, he does. The Tokugawa are thrown into a panic. The samurai may be disciplined, but their muskets are antiques. Their cannons fire like sneezes. Their ships, still made of wood. You hear it in every government hall you visit. What do we do now? Historians still argue whether the shogunate could have negotiated better terms. But you see the truth. Japan's isolation made it peaceful, but also vulnerable. The pressure fractures the centuries-old order. The Treaty of Kanagawa is signed under threat of force. It opens 2 ports to American ships. Not much at first glance, but it's the crack that lets the flood in soon. The British arrive. then the Russians, then the Dutch again. You watch as foreigners walk the streets of Yokohama, top hats bobbing awkwardly through markets. Curious children peer at them. Some laugh, some cry. One tries to sell a hairpin for 5 times its value. The Westerner buys it, confused but smiling. Japan is changing, and the samurai, they're caught in the middle. You speak with one in Edo who wears armor over Western trousers. We must learn, he says, tapping a book titled Principles of Naval Engineering, or we die. Others disagree. Anti-foreign sentiment boils over. You visit CHSH and Satsuma, powerful domains where young, radical samurai gather by lamplight, sharpening blades and quoting Son J. Revere, the emperor, expel the barbarians. You witness secret duels, political assassinations. One man throws a sword into a Western trading post and runs. Another tries to build a cannon from scrap iron and sheer fury. It backfires literally. Still, the unrest grows. The shogunate loses face again and again. When foreign gunboats bombard CHS in retaliation, the people don't blame the rebels. They blame the shogun. You see posters plastered across villages. The Tokugawa cannot protect us. A different voice begins to stir their emperor. Until now, a ceremonial figure cloistered in Kyoto, mostly ignored. But now, radical samurai paint him as a divine solution. Let the emperor rule, they chant. Let the samurai fight for Japan, not the shogun. You see the tension rise. Town by town, the final straw comes in 1868. The Meiji Restoration. You stand in Kyoto as imperial banners are raised. A new young emperor emerges, installed with full political power. He's barely a man, but he's a symbol. The shogunate is declared abolished. The samurai react and march. What follows is brief but bitter. The Boshin War, you follow both sides. Some samurai loyal to the Tokugawa, others to the emperor. They clash in the snow-covered fields of Toba-Fushimi, then again at Aizu. You see men with swords charge into gunfire. You see cavalry wearing breastplates against rifles. It's futile, it's heroic. It's the end of the samurai as rulers. By mid-1869, the last of the Tokugawa loyalists surrenders, and with that surrender, the curtain falls on a 700-year era. You stand at the edge of a battlefield turned flower field. A samurai banner lies, torn in the grass. A crow picks at the remains of a half-buried wakizashi. Children pass by, laughing, chasing a dog. They don't notice the sword. Or perhaps they just don't care anymore. The sword is gone from the belt, but not from the spirit. You return to Japan now as a ghost of history, hovering between tradition and transformation. The Meiji era has dawned on age, where the word samurai still echoes, but is increasingly drowned out by the roar of factories, trains, and change. You walk through Tokuno, longer Edo where steam whistles pierce the morning mist. Horse-drawn carriages share the road with rickshaws. Telegraph wires cross above streets once patrolled by armored warriors. The city beats with a strange new pulse. In a shop window, you see a katana mounted beside a Western military saber. A shopkeeper polishes them both with equal care. Which sells more? You ask, he smiles. The saber wins, but the sword still draws the eye. The Meiji government moves fast. They abolish the samurai class, stripping them of their stipends. The Heian chicken reform dismantles feudal domains. Surnames once a samurai privilege are now granted to all. The wearing of swords in public band, you watch a samurai in his twilight. His name is Takahiro, once a retainer of a noble house there. At the decree on a town bulletin board, he reads it twice, then slowly unslings his daishu and lays it down before a shrine. His daughter later tells you he never touched another blade, but he sharpened kitchen knives like they were sacred. Many samurai try to adapt. Some become officers in the new imperial army. Others open schools, businesses, or simply disappear into the swelling middle class. But not all can let go. In 1877, a final cry is raised. You travel to Kisha, where a legendary figure, Saigi Takamori, has gathered thousands of former samurai in rebellion. They call him the last true samurai. Once a hero of the Meiji Restoration, Seigo now sees the soul of Japan slipping into smoke. He believes the reforms have gone too far, too fast. The new world, he says, has no room for honor. You watch his army, dressed in faded uniforms and tattered pride, march towards certain doom against modern rifles and artillery. The Satsuma Rebellion is not just a war, it's a funeral. The final battle comes at Shiroyama. You watch from a distant hill as Seigo, wounded but unbowed, leads one last charge at dawn. Bullets cut down men faster than any sword ever did. Seigo's death, whether by enemy bullet or his own blade, remains a mystery. Historians still argue whether he truly committed seppuku or was too wounded to try. Either way, he becomes legend. A statue of him stands today in Ueno Park, walking a dog in peasant clothes. Children play at its feet. Tourists take photos. Few remember the weight of the name, and yet the samurai spirit survives in strange places. You see it in a kendo match in a Tokyo school, gym bamboo swords clashing with shouts of men. Coat D. You hear it in a business meeting where the word giri duty holds as much power as a contract. You feel it in the slow, deliberate movements of an old woman arranging flowers. Discipline, precision, stillness. The samurai live on not in armor, but in art, not on battlefields, but in boardrooms, in bushidō books lining bookstore shelves, in anime and cinema, in the rhythm of tradition that beats beneath neon lights. You attend a ceremony at a modern shrine. A man in a tailored suit bows before an altar. Behind him, his child holds a toy katana. You lean down. Do you know what that is? You whisper. She nods solemnly. A samurai sword. What's a samurai, you ask? She grins. A hero, not a bureaucrat, not a rebel, not a ghost, a hero, perhaps. In the end, that's what they've become. Stories, ideals, warnings, aspirations. The sword may rust, but the idea shines brighter than ever. The cherry blossoms still fall, and in every petal quiet, fleeting, defiant, you hear the whisper, remember. And now, breathe. The last echoes of battle have faded, and the clang of swords has softened into silence. The smoke from the battlefield rises no longer, and the cherry blossoms, they fall quietly once more. Imagine yourself walking along a quiet temple path at dusk. The stone is warm beneath your feet. Wind rustles the tall grass. Somewhere in the fading light, you hear the distant beat of a wooden drum. Not the call to war, but the call to evening prayer. You pass a weathered armor set on display, tucked within the shadows of a shrine. Dust coats the helmet. The blade is clean, but no longer sharp, and yet you bow your head, because even in stillness there is respect. Now look up at the stars, clear and unwavering above Japan's mountains. Those stars have witnessed every rise and fall, every oath whispered in the dark, every vow carved in steel. They saw the Minamoto banners flutter. They saw Nobunaga's fires blaze. They saw Saigo's last stand, and they see you now, resting. Let the past drift gently from your thoughts, like a lantern floating down a river. Let it glow, then fade, because the journey is done. You've walked with warriors, dined with lords, whispered beside rebels, and through it all, you've seen that even as swords rust and empires fall, honor lingers. Softly now, draw the blanket to your chin. Let your breath slow. Let the hush of the centuries settle in, and sleep beneath a sky of blossoms.